Are you a polyglot not looking to mix up your languages? Or are you someone who's looking to be a polyglot and not want to mix up your languages while you're learning them? Well, you're in the right place, because although I don't consider myself a polyglot, I have learned 3 languages other than my native languages, which would be Spanish, French, and Portuguese that I have studied, and I speak English natively. How don't I mix up these languages? That is the question I get pretty often. And you know, over time, I've done my research watching other people's videos to see what they have to say, and really, it's a conscious effort. First thing that you want to do is you want to make sure you have the pronunciation down for each. Now, you don't have to be perfect because, of course, if you're a later language learner and you're not focusing specifically on pronunciation by mimicking people exactly how they speak, then at least trying your best to make sure that your pronunciation is different or as different as possible from your native language or other languages that you're learning, because I've seen people who tried to speak Spanish after having studied French and then they end up having a French accent while they speak Spanish. But the best thing you can do is try to separate the pronunciation of each language and do that as early as possible, because the more you go on in your studies, the more your habits set in, and then it gets harder to separate the two. So, for instance, Spanish and French, they have similarities, but they are 2 different languages with 2 different pronunciations. They have 2 different phonetic systems. So, sometimes you do share a sound here and there between a language, but for the most part, if you hear Spanish spoken and you hear French spoken, you can tell which one is which and that they're different. So first things first, make sure you've got the pronunciation separated for both. That way, when you're thinking about one pronunciation that's different from English, you're more likely to mix words because your mind is set on one language and not 2 different ones. Second thing, ladder your languages. I already did a video on this technique, what it is and how to do it and everything, so I will just put that link somewhere in the description or in this video. Third thing, you want to make sure you have a good base in the language you're learning before starting a new one. People have asked me, what do you think of learning 2 languages at once? And I do learn 2 languages at once, but not both from the same level. So I studied Spanish for a few years before starting French. I had a good grasp on grammar, an okay grasp on pronunciation, pretty good grasp on vocabulary because I've been working at it for years. Now, you don't necessarily need to wait 5 years before studying a new language, but make sure that you have all the basics down and you're at least an intermediate level before you start a new language, especially if that language is going to be like the one that you have the good base in. Because if you're studying something like Spanish and French at the same time at a beginner level, or Spanish and Portuguese, you're more likely to mix those 2 up than if you started studying Spanish and Korean at the same time, at the same level. So then the next thing you want to do is separate your languages based on tasks. So kind of like dedicate a certain task to a certain language. So is there a show that you like to watch that is dubbed in a language that you're learning? That's one way that I study my languages. So for Spanish, I usually look at telenovelas, but I have also looked at shows that were dubbed in Spanish, such as different anime and things. For French, I've watched Code Lyoko and Totally Spies in their native language. So what I would do is I would not then go and watch that same show in Spanish. I want to make sure that each time I go to watch that show, it's the same language so that I'm in the French mindset and I'm less likely to mix the 2 up when I associate the language with the show. You can also dedicate 1 day to focusing on one language. So for instance, when I write in my diary, I do 1 day in Spanish, then I do the next day in French, and then I do the next day in Portuguese. Now, you can do that with just your diary, you could do it with studying and shows that you watch, a dedicated day to Spanish, dedicated day to French. Even thinking in your mind and consciously trying to produce the language, you could do just 1 day at a time. And then that way it'll help you less likely mix up your languages. I'm not saying these tips will prevent you from mixing up languages, because sometimes it just happens. Sometimes you just need more sleep. Sometimes maybe the languages are too similar at the moment and you really just need to get things sorted out on your own. But these tips should help you be less likely to mix up your languages. And that's all. If you guys have tips, it would be greatly appreciated, as I am somebody who has studied 3 similar languages and is still looking to find ways to not mix them up. I don't mix them up usually, but sometimes I do mix Spanish into Portuguese, since that is my most recent language that I have studied. And leave your tips in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye! Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, remember to press the like button so I can know to make more content like this. Also, remember to leave a comment telling me if you like these kind of videos, or if you want me to make other kinds of videos. Also, remember to subscribe so that you can know when my new videos come out. They come out every week. Also, you can check my blog for other content on travel and language learning, and you can check my Twitter for updates.